Hi guys, I'm James from Pace, and today I'm going to talk to you about my GRK GS2 Evo chassis from Shibata. So originally I filmed quite a long video about the build process and giving some hints and tips as you went through, and I decided it was a pretty boring video and scrapped it. So I started again, just going to get straight to the point and tell you that this thing is great. It's a budget entry-level chassis designed for more beginner level drivers, but it's not to say it can't be enjoyed by somebody with a bit more experience like myself. I don't generally talk about prices on this video, so if you want to see the latest prices and stock availability and things like that, check out the links I put in the description below and you can go and check it out for yourself. So I built this exactly as the manual says. All the turnbuckles are as the instructions told you to build it. I always like to run a chassis first time as the manual says, because that's how customers are going to build it, and I want to get a feeling for, you know, if there's any must-have tweaks or anything like that. But I have to say that the stock settings that they've suggested for this chassis, they've absolutely nailed. It's really easy to drive, it's really responsive, it's really fun, most importantly, which I think is all you could ever ask for in an entry-level chassis. And to be perfectly honest, you don't need to make too many tweaks to this, but it's not to say you can't have some fun and try and work out some improved settings or more personalized settings for yourself. So the only settings I've changed on this chassis so far, I've changed the rear camber and I've changed the front damper lower position in one hole. So I've changed the rear camber because I ran at two different tracks so far. I ran at Slide House, which they run a top line tyre. It's a small technical P-tile track, and I ran at NRD on the resin there using these tyres, which are the DS Racing Triple F0 Mark III rear-wheel drive tyres. So I've gone to 5 degrees camber instead of 2 or 2.5, I think it was standard, and I changed the front damper position because I've changed from the original stock dampers. The original stock dampers are made of plastic, and they're actually very good plastic dampers. They're very precise. The only thing I'll say is you need to take a bit of care when you build them to make sure that on the piston edge you deburr it and there's no mold marks or anything like that left. Otherwise they bind up a bit. But as you're building them, if you just make sure that they move freely without any restrictions, you're not going to run into any problems. As standard, it includes 400 weight silicone oil, which will work quite well for outdoor bashing, tarmac, that kind of thing, or maybe some higher grip carpet possibly. I was never going to keep the plastic dampers on very long because I always prefer to run aluminium dampers. So these are aluminium dampers that come as standard with a car. They're running the standard 2-hole piston and overdose 10 weight oil, and they work great. The only thing I will say is I think maybe 3 1mm hole pistons will be better suited, I think, for this chassis, but we'll see. I will be swapping the pistons out at some point, but right now they work fine. They're really good. But yeah, the overall feeling of the chassis as standard is really fun. It's really responsive. It's a bit noisy, which I like, and it's a fun car to drive. The stock geometry on the front gives really good lock, quite nice Ackerman. You could definitely chase a slightly more parallel Ackerman if that's your thing, but it's not required. The car just drives great as it is. I did change the damp hole position on the bottom, as I mentioned, mostly because the ride height when I changed dampers was just a little bit low on the front. It's something that I think if you stick with the stock dampers, it's kind of okay. And like I say, you need to realize that every single criticism I've got of this chassis is, to put it in context, I really enjoyed the car. I really enjoyed driving it, and I'm really hyped to keep driving it. So I'm not disappointed in any way, but there's a few things I personally want to tweak just to see if it helps and makes things even better. So the front ride height, I want to get it up a bit. I want to raise the front end a few more millimeters and just allow a bit more droop, because I think it's the lower ball stud on the knuckle, being an extended type, I think it's pushing the lower arm down and restricting how much lower it will be able to move. And I think if I change that to a shorter ball stud, that's probably going to fix the problem. But it's something I'll do when I'm next at a track to make sure that I can do a before and after comparison. I'm running the stock pinion and spare, which is a 20 tooth and a 78 tooth. I did change some option parts that changed the gear ratio, which was mostly because I was running on small technical low grip tracks, and the stock rate FDR I think is around 9.5, and I swapped to a 12 tooth gear in the rear instead of a 16, which I think put the FDR to about 12.5, which was just better suited to the track and the grip levels available. I've also installed a gear diff, which massively increased the grip in the rear. I put 1000 weight oil in, and it really nice. I was quite surprised at how much extra speed it gave. I was expecting a bit because it comes as a standard with a spool, which just means your throttle control has to be perfect. You know, if you make a mistake, you slip the wheels a bit too much and you slow down. Whereas with a diff of any kind, whether it's ball diff or gear diff, just helps you get a bit more easy traction essentially. But yeah, so I added that. It gave a lot more speed, a bit more control. So I was super happy with that. I changed the stock springs from the standard springs, which worked fine, to the Shibata 5.1 left and right wound coils, which are really good. I've actually used them on a few chassis and they work very well. So they're on the front, and on the rear of the Shibata 9 coils, which again worked very well. I'm going to try the same springs that I've got on the front on the rear as well, and just see how that works. It may be worse. I've just got a gut feeling that they might be really easy to get traction. As for electrics, I'm running an AccuBalance Jarvis XX right now, although this will be getting swapped out for a regular Jarvis. Not because there's anything wrong with this one, just because the chassis is not really set up to be super speedy or hyper powerful, so I don't need the extra power that's available, and this ESC is planned for a different chassis. I'm running a Fledge 13.5 because they're super smooth, run nice and cool, and I really like the motors. I'm also running a KO Propo RSX 3110 version D servo, which, as any regular viewers will know, is my servo of choice and goes in every chassis that I run, along with the Overdose dice, which is the same deal. It's the one that suits me the best. I'm also obviously running an AccuBalance Trace, as I've mentioned in other videos. I put them in everything, and yeah, I've been really happy with the way this thing drove. It does also include wheels and tyres, which are not on it right now because I've been running at different tracks. They're the T37s in black, which they're very nice wheels actually, I have to say. T37s being my favourite wheel of all time, and the HDPE tyres, which work really well and are the same tyres they use at RCC in Japan, which I've used many times over the years and work very well. So another upgrade that I did, which is absolutely not required, but while I had everything off to do the gear diff and the gear change in the back, I put the Delrin bushes that Shibata sell in the steering rack, and to be perfectly honest, it's made it a fraction smoother and a fraction more precise, but they're absolutely not required. The standard bushes are fine. Again, if you deburr them, since they're molded, they work really well and you don't need to. But if you're going to be replacing them for, you know, maintenance down the line when you've ran the car for a while, I'd probably grab the upgraded version instead of the standard version because they're very cheap and they do the job. You do get a diffuser on the rear, which is super cool as well. I've used a wrap up next angled mount to put the ESC on the back, and the only reason I did that was because the Shibata plate that they sell, which is just a right angle bracket to mount a carbon plate to or something to stick your ESC on, it wasn't in stock when I built the chassis, so I've used something I already have. It's not ideal actually. The angle of the brackets means that the plate touches the top deck, so instead of being very smooth, it's very slightly bent. So I will be swapping that out when I rewire this. As I say, I'm putting a Jarvis in, but I'm waiting on a new soldering iron to arrive before I rewire. But yeah, other than that, I've been super impressed. The chassis was really nice to drive, really responsive, really stable, which I think is super important at entry level, and just fun. I mean, it's been a while since I ran a car that the stock settings were good enough to have a great day on track. So it's just been really nice. Dan, who is one of the guys that runs NRD, bought and built one of these on Saturday, and running together has been so much fun. We were just sort of bumping each other constantly, and the cars don't really move. You just get on and carry on instead of being knocked and having to, you know, recover and catch up in the next corner. You just carried on where you were. One of the cool things I've done with a couple of friends of mine with this is we've got a bit of a deal going between us where we're all running identical cars. So the plan is that we're going to run identical specs, identical ESC settings, identical damper settings, identical gyro settings, absolutely everything the same. And we're only doing it as a bit of an experiment really, to see how it changes the way we drive together. Does it make us run a bit tighter and neater? Because we often run similar or the same chassis. Currently we're all running on Garms, but we have different track width, we have different damper settings, we have different EFC settings, and inevitably somebody has a bit more grip or somebody's got a bit more grip in the late corner or something like that, and it's just an experiment really. Does it make any difference? We're also going to run the same body incidentally, but only because we all fancy having the same one. So yeah, I'm super excited to see how it goes. I'm really struggling not to pile on the upgrades for this because we've got I really want to put a carbon conversion on, only because I think it'll look nicer. I don't think it needs it currently, although I haven't tested it. It might add some magic to the chassis, but I'm really keen to keep this as basic as I can. And as I say, I've got this deal with my buddies that means we're going to keep them as standard, but I have a feeling I'm going to build a second one that's going to go full option. There is also a premium version of the carbon being released in black soon, which looks really cool, and I probably am going to go for that one, I think. So yeah, we'll see. But for now, I've absolutely loved it. It's been one of the most impressive builds that I've had in a while for a plastic chassis, and the way it drove really surprised me, and I can't wait to keep driving it. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please leave a comment below. Maybe consider liking and sharing.